So I've been a professional voiceover actor for about 15, 16 years now. I started all the way back in 2009 in New York City, and received a couple of really life-changing opportunities. And I'll still never forget that when I booked my very first job, which was I did about 5 episodes of Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. In 2009, I played a character named Corey for 5 episodes. And, me going from a kid who was made fun of in school for being too obsessed with Pokemon and annoying the crap out of everybody around me about it, getting to get paid to be on the anime that had still been going for 10 plus years at that point, and do 5 episodes and, made one of my first, real paychecks for a job. Literally, when I finished, I was like, if I never get another opportunity to do voiceover as a professional actor ever again after this, I'll be happy with that, because I just worked on my childhood show. But lo and behold, it ended up actually lasting into a 15-year-long career. So to talk more in depth about what some of that means, the highs, the lows, the peaks, the valleys, the rewards, the challenges, the pitfalls, etc. One of my Patreon supporters, Wolf Drake, asked a few sort of connected questions about my path as a voiceover actor. I did do a video a couple months ago that was called The Past, Present, and Future of Voice Acting that was a little bit more of a broader scale thing about the industry in general, and not so personal about me, even though I had a lot of stories about my own personal experiences. But this is addressing certain things that I didn't talk about in that one. So if you either want to go watch that first, or if you watch this one first, either or, so I know I'm not repeating too many things at the time. But there will probably be some repeated facts here and there if they happen to be relevant. So the first of these kind of connected questions was, what used to be my end goal when I started voice acting, and compared to what my goals are in the present. So the one kind of through line of my goals in of being an actor in general was, it's going to sound so basic, but it's really true, and I think that actually it's something that, to a certain extent, probably a good chunk of actors might share in, even if they might not describe it the same way, is I just want to be involved with doing really cool stuff. There's just something a basic thing about wow, this project is awesome, this character that I'm getting to perform is really cool, and I'm having fun doing their voice and performing their lines. Just the simple, straightforward factor of getting to do that alone is one of the few things that has remained completely consistent since even before I was doing this at all. To retread a little bit of old ground, when I was a kid, when I was in middle school and beginning of high school, I became really obsessed with voice actors when I started researching a lot of the history of them and who they were, from a combination of sites like TV Tome and a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that I'd seen growing up, audio commentaries on DVDs of some of the anime I was collecting and other such things, and learning more about how the industry actually worked and who these actors were that I was listening to, getting to know who they are as people a little bit, then starting to go to conventions and meeting them there, and learning more about what they do, and asking stuff and everything. And it was a few particular characters in the shows that I was watching, the stuff that I was listening to, that I felt kind of connected to in a vocal sense, and a I guess sort of performative sense. I'd never been an actor as a kid. I never took theater. I didn't do any kind of traditional performing stuff. It's why I always talk about how I never had a traditional acting background. That was never something that was part of my path. And I don't think I said this in the previous video, but I do look back and kind of wish that I had gotten involved with the theater program at my high school or middle school or anything. I am glad that I didn't go to college to be an actor. Not that I don't think that I would have learned like a lot of stuff, but I know quite a few people that didn't go to a traditional acting school that have gone on to have amazing careers from just being studious. I didn't really start taking proper like acting classes until much later. I took a couple when I was in New York, but I didn't really start taking a lot of major ones until I was living in LA. And by the time that I moved to LA, I already had done like a fair bit of work when I was in New York, not a ton, but enough to immediately jump into that business afterward. But I digress. As a kid, and just fantasizing about the prospect of actually doing this professionally. I was reminded of this. This is an interesting factor because this was around the time that I was starting to get to know some of the actors a little more personally and actually working with them on some of my projects at the time. Two of the first professional voiceover actors that I ever worked with were Kyle Hebert and Kevin N. Connolly, both of which I met through specifically the Full Metal Alchemist fandom. Back when the first FMA series was airing on Adult Swim, and I guess it would have been like 2004, 2005, no, maybe even 2003, I can't remember, but early 2000s, there were these fan groups that had AOL Instant Messenger, like fan chats with some of the actors. So they did Q&As with a lot of the cast of the show at that time. And Kyle and Kevin, I both got to know, a little bit more in depth. And eventually I got to work with them, and they actually did some voices on the Parody Rangers cartoons that I made in 2006, 2007, kind of around there. And, I had always been a huge Dragon Ball fan, still am to this day. And funny thing, I remember getting it in my head for 2 seconds, and I don't know why it was so even like delusionary that this is even a thing that could ever happen. And this is before Funimation was even really using people like from out of town. I think Full Metal Alchemist was actually one of the first shows that they ever did, the first series, where they did actually have some guest actors. As in like that were not living in Texas. Like they had like a few out of town actors like Johnny M. Bosch and Carrie Savage and some of them that came in and did some guest characters here and there. And so I don't even know why I had this fantasy to begin with, but they were about to start working on the final of the original 13 Dragon Ball Z movies, which they called Wrath of the Dragon, the Tapion Hirudegarn movie. Which I remember I would love to voice Tapion, right? As if that was ever anything that had even a remote chance of actually happening. And I remember talking to, I think, both Kevin and Kyle, who both worked on that movie, because obviously Kyle went in to do Teen Gohan, and Kevin did some additional voices on the film. And they said, "Oh yeah, no, we've already done that. We just finished working on that a little while ago." And I remember being really sad and disappointed in that moment, but also having enough of a reality check to be like, why would I ever even be they don't know who the hell I am, and I have no connection to that world whatsoever. That was, I think, around the time that as I was going to conventions and getting to know some of these people, and them knowing who I was and recognizing, my screen name or whatever, But I started to understand, and thankfully this was when, as I always bring it up in all these interviews that I'm doing with all these Canadian actors that I've been having. I think the Sam Vincent interview will probably have been out by the time that this is here. Trevor Duvall, the voice print with Trevor Duvall and guests, which was his podcast where he interviewed a lot of these great Canadian actors and everything. It was from that I learned a lot of the advice that I needed to hear. And one of the very first things was actually from Sam Vincent on their first episode of, you need to be honest with yourself about, do you really have what it takes to be able to do such a thing professionally when you're going up against people that are already actors, let alone doing voice acting specifically. That's what you're up against. And this is, back then when there were not, 5,000 times the amount of people that do this, all over the world. These are just the major centers they're talking about, LA, Texas, New York, places in Canada, etc. And I think that was good that I had that reality check of just I'm not a person that could do this yet. Like, who the hell am I to like have any illusions of like, yeah, they would think of me for this major character in this movie, by this major, property, whatever. But the point being, that was one of those goals of like, but maybe someday, somehow I'll do something on Dragon Ball. And it wasn't until, after I won that contest that I did at this convention, I met these two directors, including the one that was doing Pokemon at the time. I got that first audition opportunity. I didn't book my first audition. Fun fact, I don't know if I've ever talked about this. I probably have at some point, maybe in a much older video. But my very first audition, which I did not book, was for Riley from Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. He was in a couple episodes, the Lucario trainer. Lost to the great Mark DeRazon, famous for the voice of Guts from Berserk, who directed me on my second anime that I ever did after Pokemon, which was Bakuman. And he played my dad in Sabura, and we've been in a couple other shows together. He's a great guy. And but because when I did that first audition, the director said, I know that we owe you because of that contest you won at New York Anime Fest, but I wouldn't really call you in to audition for Pokemon if I didn't think you were good, which was great, and that was a good vote of confidence. And so I kept at it, and then I booked that part, and I was like, wow, I worked on my childhood show, as I mentioned, at the beginning of this. So, but even then, those opportunities that I was getting, around New York City, the edutainment games, the couple little animes that I would do once in a while, some video games, here and there, some of the Wadget Eye, Dave Gilbert, point and click adventure games like Resonance and Primordia that I did back then, some of these things. But I wasn't really thinking too hard about, I really want to be on this and this and this and this and this until I moved to LA, and then I started really taking it seriously. And so at the time, this is a cool one, actually. Right when I moved to LA, literally the weekend that I moved to LA, I was at Anime Expo 2014. And that year, Viz was doing a premiere event where they were finally unveiling the cast of the long-awaited, long fantasized by many an anime fan, uncut, true to the Japanese original, story and script and names and everything, redub of the classic Sailor Moon series alongside Sailor Moon Crystal. So, and of course, many friends of mine that I had, worked with and gotten to know by that point, ended up getting to be in the cast of that show. And they, revealed the main 5 Sailor Guardians and Tuxedo Mask at that point. Actually, a little funny side story of that I'll even mention. I had just gotten to know Robbie Damon, who's now, a big shot, obviously, Critical Role and Data Everything and all that stuff. But I had just gotten to know him a little tiny bit online, a little bit, how we hadn't met in person. And I was at AX, and I was trying to find him. He was there that weekend, and I was like, hey, where you at? And he's like, are you at the Sailor Moon panel? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, cool, I'll see you in a little while. And I'm like, okay. And I'm in my seat. And the voice of Mamoru, Tuxedo Mask, Robbie Damon, that I'm like, you son of a bitch, up there. And little did I know, but this was that I would end up getting to be in the show with them. This is the funny thing. I resigned myself in the audience of that panel, summer 2014, when that was going on. I said, I want to work on this dub. I want to work on this Sailor Moon dub. And I want specifically, this was absolute dream come true. I want specifically to work on Sailor Moon Super S or Supers, which was the season that I saw the most of as a kid that I grew up with when I watched the old Canadian dub. I wanted to audition for the Amazon trio, Tiger's Eye, Fisheye, and Hawkeye. So, and lo and behold, I started on that path of, okay, I have to get in with Studiopolis. I have to, get to know the right person or whatever. And it literally wasn't until Mona Marshall, who I became friends with separately, and I worked with her on Tome at the time, she recommended me to my agent that I've been with for going to be close to a decade, almost a decade, Arlene Thornton and Associates, who've been wonderful to me. I was able to book with them as an agent, as a voiceover actor for them, because Ian Cordy, the creator of OKKO, cast me in that show. I had to join the union, and once I was union, Mona was able to recommend me to Arlene Thornton as an actor. I got with them. As a result, I got my first actual audition for Studiopolis, which was for, I think, the Naruto The Last movie. I think that was what it was, or maybe like a really early Boruto project or something like that. So that was my kind of foot in the door. Then I was able to get in contact with the casting person. I got sent my first like real bigger audition, which was for a show called Terraform Mars, and I lucked out really hard, and I booked the lead character on this show, Akari. My very first thing with Studiopolis was voicing the main character of a new show that happened to be done by Viz. So, right place, right time. They were just starting up Sailor Moon Supers, and I will never forget the day that I got that audition for The Three Amazons and Pegasus. An interesting thing, I wanted really badly to be Fisheye, specifically, because I really liked that character the most of the three of them, and they were such a different kind of out-of-the-box kind of character, because obviously, if those of you who don't know, they were changed to be female in the edited version back in the day, when in actuality they were a femboy, as a matter of fact, if it's all right to say that, and liked to disguise themselves as gay men or as women in order to trick the victims of the day, to try to open the mirrors of their souls and try to find Pegasus and all that. And I just found that to be a really intriguing, like kind of tragic and like fun, whimsical, evil kind of character. And I remember when I was doing the audition for all four of those characters, I was trying to take all of the bass out of my voice when I was reading for Fisheye. And actually, Devin Mack, voice of Sonic from Sonic Prime and Raccoon and all that, was directing me on those auditions because I really wanted to get them right. And I remember like being frustrated, like I threw my headphones down. I'm like, back, I need a second. And I went outside, I was all angry and frustrated, and whatever, I just couldn't get it right for some reason. I came back in, I tried again, and then I did Pegasus afterward. I submitted, stopped thinking about it, I'm like, okay, Chris, you have had your shot at this thing that you had as a goal. You had an opportunity. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, but you at least got to audition. And I'm like, cool, okay. And then, to my shock, I think a couple weeks later, I get an email from Jamie Simone, the head of Studiopolis, saying, hey, you've got a callback audition for Pegasus. They want you to do what you did for your voice for Fisheye. Do that for Pegasus. And I was like, oh. So I took this higher sort of thing that I did for Fish's Eye. I took the vocal quality of that. And because they sent me a clip, they sent me a Japanese clip of Pegasus as Helios, as his human form. And they said, we need Pegasus to sound younger than Tuxedo Mask, because Tuxedo Mask, I think, was like 17. And they wanted Pegasus to be more kind of like 13, because they wanted, I think that part of it, I don't know this for sure, but I think that they wanted to have the ages of Chibiusa and Pegasus like seem a little bit more closer together, because with no offense meant to the original actor that played him in the old dub, but Rini, I'm Pegasus, I think that they were like, ooh, people might have interpreted that as kind of creepy when like they're both meant to be kids, like they're both kind of kids at heart type characters, and they wanted to have that relationship between the two of them be very sweet and innocent as it's supposed to be. So I took the voice that I did for Fisheye and then implanted it into the personality of Pegasus and Helios, and played around with that and did my second take, and then I got the part. And I was very nervous, and we spent a lot of hours on that to get it just right. And I actually remember we even went back later and we redid my first couple episodes, because by the time that we got maybe a good like 5-6 episodes in, they were like, okay, now you found the voice, let's go back to the very beginning stuff and make it consistent all the way through, which I was very happy about. I'm glad that like we actually were able to go back and do that. We also did a lot of, this is a little bit of trivia, but we did some bonus takes of the pronunciation of Elysium, which we had like Elysium, or something like that. We came up with different versions of it to go with. And also same thing with Helios, Elios, like we were going to wait to figure out what, I think maybe what Japan wanted to pick, whatever they would preferred. So, but I couldn't believe it. And then I got to do, some press stuff. I went to some conventions to promote the dub and everything with all the rest of the cast. I got to know Amanda Miller and Kate Higgins and, some of these folks that I hadn't met before or didn't get to know super well until then. And, they've become longtime friends and they're wonderful and they've treated me very, very well and they're great. So... and actually, even on the Dragon Ball thing, going back to that again, I'll go back to Dragon Ball because this is kind of cool. The whole thing with just wanting to do the show at all, I had since eventually gotten in with Okatron, actually thanks to the lovely and talented Natalie Hoover, who had recommended me when they were starting to take people from outside of Texas to audition for stuff like Smite, the video game Smite that I'd worked on, and Paladins, a couple of the games that they were doing at the time. And so eventually, as they were going through Dragon Ball Super, I got to audition for some of the new characters in Dragon Ball Super. And then eventually, this was interesting. I had done a couple gigs for Okatron here and there, a few little small parts in some video game projects. This was part of the path to that goal. So I was a casting and voice director for a company called Servios. And we used to do these really cool virtual reality games, one of which was a pirate ship battle game called Battle Wake. And I pitched to the creators of the game, hey, it'd be really cool for this pirate game. Why don't we get the voices of the Straw Hats? At the time, our usual recording studio that we had to do our previous games was full up. So I said, hey, there's this place in Texas, Okatron. They work with all the Dragon Ball Z, One Piece, Funimation guys. Let's get the Straw Hat actors and do this game with them. So we did, and I flew down to Texas for a couple days, and a couple people from the team were there, and we got Colleen Clinkenbeard, Eric Vale, Chris Sabat, Sonny Strait, Ian Sinclair, Brina Palencia, I think one other person too, I can't remember. But we had all of them, and we had them play these cool, crazy, CG, awesome kind of pirate characters and everything. While I was there, I got to know a couple of the audio engineers for that worked at Okatron, some of which are still there, some of which are not. Around that same time, the Broly movie was premiering, and they were in the midst of working on the Tournament of Power arc in Dragon Ball Super, and Raleigh Pickens, who was one of the head engineers, and he was the director for Dragon Ball Super for the most part. He had this giant poster with every single character, all of the individual team members of all the universes from the Tournament of Power, and just filling out as many as he could, different actors, different people to have in there, and etc. And so on breaks, I got to talk with him a little bit about some stuff. And I said, hey, and then actually he took me to the Broly movie when they were premiering it, because I happened to be there. We went to go see it. We talked Dragon Ball on the way there, because the fact that he knew I was a super nerd, and we talked about it. I had got to talk to Sabat again. I hadn't seen Sabat in years. We talked about a bunch of stuff. He was great. And we talked about them getting Brian Drummond to play Copy Vegeta a couple arcs before that for that little filler thing and everything. And so I kind of formed that relationship a little bit. And now I work for them quite a bit, because I've also done adaptive writing for them on a bunch of video game projects, and I've done more acting with them, quite a bit on other shows and things. I did the Trails of Cold Steel anime. I starred as Talion in that show, which was fantastic. Austin Sisk, who's another engineer, has become a good friend, who he got to want to cast me because he loved my work on Hunter x Hunter. So the Viz connection paid off into forming that relationship with Austin as well. But at the time, this was 2018 or 19, I came back to Texas, and I was recording the lead character, Nod Pikes, for a game called, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the name of it. Holy crap. Markiplier played it. It was a really cool point-and-click adventure, and Nod Pikes was the name of the main character, and I'm forgetting the name of the game itself. But Brittany Lauda cast me as the lead, and I was there working with her, and I was while I was in Dallas, working at her home studio, I reached out to Raleigh again and I said, hey, I'm in town. You got any characters left on Dragon Ball Super? And he's like, I've got a guy with one line. Whoosh, get over here. I took an Uber. She was like, go ahead, make your dream come true. Excuse me. So, hopped in a Lyft, went to Okatron, a good 20 minutes away. Went there, did my one line, went home. That was a goal accomplished. finally getting to voice a character on an official Dragon Ball thing, on the new anime, 10, 15, whatever year, however many years it was later. Oh yeah, no, well over a decade later, I got to do that. And I couldn't believe my life, So I've accomplished a whole lot of those goals. Funnily enough, the last kind of one in that vein that I haven't done yet still, and I don't know how likely it is, because it is a very particular kind of thing. But my last sort of really hyper-specific goal like that really means the world to me is I want to voice a Pokemon. I have had the incredible fortune of getting to voice several trainers, like human characters, with Corey on the anime and a couple other little incidentals. And then eventually, when I moved to LA, as I've mentioned many times, I voiced Colress and Bryson and Berg in Pokemon Generations, which was amazing. But I've never gotten to be a creature. I've auditioned for many. I have auditioned for many, many, many starters and some of the talking Pokemon in the movies way back in the day, and when some of the new ones come up every so often. And often people will ask me, like, oh, which one would you want to do? Honestly, and I will mention this too, I kind of feel this way about Mega Man and Sonic as well. If I were to ever voice a character in either of those franchises, I would love to voice a new Pokemon. I would love to voice a Pokemon that's never had a voice in the show yet. But the path to that has changed. There's a lot more people in the more recent seasons that they've done with, like, Journeys and Horizons, where they've got a lot more people that specialize in creature stuff, like specifically, that like are really good at doing that. And not that I don't do that. It's funny, it even motivated me to make a creature reel, which is a specific type of demo that not every actor has, but I wanted, because that's a goal, and like that's something that I crafted, and I've tried here and there, so it's something that I still hope maybe has a chance of happening someday. You never know. But that's the last kind of one in that sort of vein. So the other kind of follow-up to this was, how has that changed, right? It's changed as I've gotten older and my priorities in life have shifted. But truth be told, it's kind of changed in ways that I don't super love, because it contradicts a lot of how I used to feel about things when I was younger, When I was first kind of getting into this, and I was very up my own ass, for lack of a better term, about like the sort of purity of art and getting into things and everything, I was meeting a lot of other people that wanted to be voice actors that, in my mind, when I was a kid, and I didn't know fucking anything either, so who was I to judge? But I felt like they were wanting to be actors for like the wrong reasons. Like, regardless of what their talent or their expertise or their, potential was to actually do the job, I was meeting a lot of people that specifically wanted to get into doing voiceover, not because they were passionate about being actors, but specifically because they just wanted to be guests at anime conventions. Now, I'm an egotist. I love doing conventions. I love selling stuff and talking to fans and meeting people. I love, doing panels and entertaining folks. Like, that is fun to me. Like, even back when I was doing conventions, long before I had any business going to conventions as a guest, I had the time of my life. It's definitely like an ego boosty type of thing. I think in a similar kind of way that some people feel that rush when they're on stage. I think that's my kind of closest equivalent to like when you're a theater actor and you love hearing audience reaction and getting that kind of immediate feedback, So I get it, and I have that perspective and can fully admit that, like, I think I get where that desire comes from. But to me, there was also part of that, like, oh, it's only, and even when I would meet like people that were in the business working, and they didn't have a passion for the art itself. They're just like, I don't give a shit about anime. I don't understand any of this. I do it as part of my job. And then if I go to a convention, like, yeah, no, I appreciate the fans and they're very nice and that's cool and everything, but it's another opportunity to make money. And I remember being so like, oh, like, how dare you like have that kind of, thought process or whatever. Now that I'm about to be 37 in a couple months, and I got bills to pay, and especially living in one of the most expensive places to live in the entire country, now I have a different perspective about that. But I don't love that I have that different kind of opinion. I don't love the fact that now I have thoughts about, I gotta get on some show, I gotta get some character that maybe we'll get a Funko Pop, because then maybe I'll get to do more conventions, and then I'll be able to make more money to afford my rent and save up for anything, a house, retirement, anything, because of how difficult it has become to make a sustainable living just being a voice actor. And this coming from someone who isn't and never has been exclusively just a voice actor. I'm friends with a lot of folks who are, exceptionally talented and deserve the careers that they have, where they're always working. High level stuff, doing very well for themselves, constantly doing conventions, constantly doing appearances, and they keep that ball rolling and growing in their career and creating more relationships with game developers and animation studios and all sorts of stuff, where they're really like getting themselves out there, and they're really like making a living, like an actual sustainable one. That's hard to do that. That's rare. It's the smallest percentage of people that actually manage to be able to do just that. Myself and even, people that are my contemporaries who, have booked great parts that have like amazing, big characters that they're known for, and, like people and the generation before me and the generation after me, and, the old school guys, the veterans, all these kind of things, it's a hard thing. It's very, very difficult to maintain that. So when I talk about my goals now, I mean, I want to just, it's another reason why, again, I had that whole thing where it's like, why do you always say, like, oh, it's me, voice of Reagan or whatever? It's like, because I got to market myself. Like I have to prove that I'm a marketable asset, for being cast, for, being sent to a convention, to entertain and do, whatever. Like all of that comes back. And that's what we're all, kind of having to do to a certain extent. There's some people that don't have to, and they're very lucky and privileged to be at that point, that they're just so good, they're so well known that they can just do their thing and they work. But again, that's a very, very small percentage. So my goal, I don't know, it's not so like rigidly like, yes, if I just get on like, this phenomenon property and book this character of whatever significance, and that happens to work, and even then there's no guarantee that that's going to magically, solve that financial, I don't want to say crisis, but, well, I guess I could say crisis, because right now, I'm in a slow period. I've been lucky enough that I've had a few good freelance jobs, mostly with production stuff and here and there with voiceover stuff, that have kept me afloat, but I haven't had much work at all doing anything. And even right now, because again, I'm still recovering with my hand and everything, I can't even do my own independent stuff right now. I could do this is pressing a single button and then having my friend help me upload it as a video and everything. But yeah, so my goal now as an actor is to just be able to have it be enough of something that I can actually save up any kind of money. I know that probably sounds a little bit like almost disheartening to hear that. It's not that I don't still fantasize about, it'd be great to work on this show or this game or whatever, like another newer one I've thought about is like Cookie Run. I would love to be a character in Cookie Run just because they seem like really fun, out there, like wacky kind of characters that seem like a lot of fun to perform. And, and like still like the Pokemon thing, if I were able to do that someday, or, any of these kind of things. One Piece, I didn't even mention One Piece. That was a 15-year long dream. And I was finally able to make that happen. That was incredible to get to be part of that show as multiple characters too, multiple named characters as well. It's like, you kidding me? This kind of segues nicely into this next kind of part of what we're talking about, which is how do you deal with the stress that comes with this, with taking this job in general, and maybe just some highly likely situations in your field of work that could potentially cause that stress. Well, what I'm talking about already, the advent of slow periods. It's not personal or unique to me. One of the things that I learned very quickly about that from one of the best people in this business, who I just saw again for the first time recently at NostalgiaCon, Rob Paulson. Talkin' Tunes, his podcast where he would interview these incredible, voiceover actors that are all friends of his. He was doing that podcast because he was having a slow period. Rob Paulson, Yakko, Pinky, Raphael, like some of the most incredible, like recognizable, legendary cartoon characters like in the world. He was having a slow period. And he's like, well, this is something to occupy myself with and give myself work to do and market and make myself marketable and etc. And it worked. And he had some great new opportunities, including not only as an actor, but as a director. He got to later go on to direct the rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which was amazing for him to get to do that. So, it is an interesting thing. It's something that I learned, and I'm very, very, very glad that I learned this pretty early on in my journey of living out here. Not this past strike that we just finished, but a strike that we had many years ago. This would have been 2015 or 2016, somewhere around there. There was a strike happening with the video game voiceover community. Excuse me. Where we were trying to see about getting residuals for certain projects. And I had the great fortune of actually getting to go to the lovely home of Jennifer Hale, another fantastic, legendary voiceover actor who's very sweet, very personable. And one of the things that she was talking about to a whole bunch of us, people from all walks of this, the new kids, the old school guys, the dubbing world, the video game world, the cartoon world, about how she was like, we all have a shelf life. All of us have a shelf life. And that's so true. No matter how hot you are on the scene, no matter how many iconic characters or whatever you've got, you will have slow periods. You will have times where you are like overblown and nobody wants to throw you a bone. Nobody thinks of you anymore. You're out of date, or like you're, whatever it is, whatever number of factors. That happens to everybody at some point. And navigating your way through that is difficult. The difference now being, which is great, and this guy actually kind of goes into the last part about the the advice bit of this, is the difference now, and Talkin' Tunes was one perfect example of that from a legend, is you occupy yourself doing your own stuff, and because it's part of marketing who you are as an actor and as a performer, the world is your oyster. There's nothing stopping you from hitting a single button and even just doing something like this. Just literally a video where you're talking to the screen and hopefully people are listening and, responding to it. But you have so many options now to get yourself out there. I mean, hell, even it's funny. This is just a recent thing that's in my mind. The Deltarune stuff. A couple of my fellow actors have seen those and been like, dude, I didn't know you could do that stuff. And I was like, yeah, like my performance is Tenna. All the crazy ass voices, like that's a fan project. That's something that was frowned upon once upon a time, and it depends on what it is. Like if you're the bridge type stuff for like using other people's footage, like that's still a little bit of a gray area, I think, even to this day. But it's also kind of a thing that's kind of faded away after a while. I think maybe even in some part because people realize, like, if I want to do this professionally, maybe I shouldn't do that. But that's a whole nother topic, but nonetheless. But yeah, I mean, like doing fan stuff in general, like that aside, that actually can be something that helps get you out there. Sometimes it can be a risk. There are other circumstances other than just that where, sometimes it might get you in some hot water depending on like the legality of it. So, you still have to kind of be careful a little bit, but like, Deltarune was a case where, like, other than those couple clips that Toby did, like that's a canvas with which, lots and lots of performers, including other fellow professionals that I know, people like Joshua Waters and Don Bennett and Alex Rochon and, you name it, some of these folks that do these, incredible fan dubs. And I mean, hell, perfect example, Alex Rochon with Kane, because of his Spamton videos. Are you kidding me? So, and that's also, even that's just as much of a rarefied circumstance. That doesn't happen super often, but that was a perfect, like all the planets aligning and, an incredible life-changing thing happened for this guy. So that's something that is both actually a bit of advice, and it's also like a stress, because the advice is always be relevant. Always do whatever you can to keep yourself relevant, because I think that's going to keep your creative juices flowing, and learning new stuff, putting new stuff out there, like, doing everything you can to, like, when you don't post something for 5 seconds on the internet alone, people think you're dead. It's part of why I started doing Kirblogs, like videos like this, because it was an easy thing for me to do on a regular basis on my YouTube channel once I started focusing more on YouTube. This is something that I can do on a regular basis, and again, even while I've got a medical issue, this is an easy thing for me to do. So I'm lucky in that regard that I have that advantage as well. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. The stress of constantly trying to keep yourself relevant, that is something that can be frustrating, because you could fart into a microphone and it will get that's not an idea for you, internet. That's a whole nother set of content no one needs to get into, but you know what I mean. Like, you could do something that you put zero effort into is more what I mean by that, and it could get a bajillion views, and I don't fucking know. And you could do something that you put all this like love and care and effort and production value into, and no one sees it. You know what I mean? So it is a bit of a risk as well. That's kind of why, for me lately, this kind of ties in with that, to make it something that's not stressful and just something that's like very low effort compared to something that I put my full effort into, like an animation project, like Tome, like Balancing Act, like the Mario RPG stuff or whatever, is to do something that's not stressful. Doing these shorts, on a very, very regular basis, that is something that's not that stressful for me to do because it's simple, and it has helped tremendously. I've gained 20K new followers on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube, just from doing these little quick form, very simple, very easy, there it is, things. And I'm glad. I am very, very glad that that's become something that I can do, and it is in a small way helping me to sustain myself financially a little bit through my Patreon and through YouTube ad revenue and all that kind of stuff, and the cameos as well, that kind of thing. But it is a stress, and the other thing too is, like, every actor deals with some form of imposter syndrome. That is the bane of being a performer, is, when you're not getting cast in every single thing left and right, and when you're surrounded by the people that are like, oh boy, they're just getting cast everywhere in every project, and they're blowing up, and they're always relevant, and they're always popular, whatever. And then it becomes difficult for you to be able to separate yourself from that and be happy for people and just be like, well, I'm doing what I'm doing, and I'm on my own path. Like, there's a never-ending sense of comparing yourself to others. And you know what? I don't have advice for that, because it's hard to not feel discouraged. It's hard to not compare yourself. It's hard to not feel, some level of like jealousy, or like, even when you're in the other opposite position. I know that people that have, living on the top of the world with their careers, but they like suffer from this kind of pressure of like, oh God, what do people think of me? Are people getting tired of me? Am I overexposing myself? Am I doing something wrong? They have it. They have their own challenges, their own stresses that come with that. Because I've talked to them about those kinds of things, and always, being worried, like, when is it going to be over? Like, when is something going to happen? When is it going to be, like, that's the end, and it's just, and then I'm a has-been, and then I'm not working anymore, whatever. But we're always constantly trying. That's why I say it's hand in hand with advice of, keeping yourself relevant and keeping yourself fresh, learning new stuff. I have found this back to the Deltarune thing again, because I've done this with so many games over the course of my whole life. Teaching yourself new things, coming up with new character voices. I've said this before, this suggestion about, read comics, read novels, play video games that don't have voiceover, and come up with voices, come up with character, vocal placements, ideas, different things, accents, dialects, speech patterns, whatever, anything. Just experiment. And even if you get like only one voice out of that, one character that like you really feel comfortable with and you can maintain, like above all else, like just then you've got something. You know, you've got a new bit of material. I'll never forget. I remember I auditioned for Pluto, not the Disney character, the anime Pluto, and I happened to get the audition for Adam, aka Astro Boy, and I read for him, knowing full well I'm not going to book this part. There's no way. You know, like I can't realistically sound like that young, but I did this kid voice for him, and I sent that through my agent, and my agent was like, "That was good. I didn't know you could do that." And I was like, "I've always been able to do that." So you surprise people, and then if they give you a shot at something that, you know, they don't expect, you might expand the amount of, you know, opportunities they'll give you, the amount of, you know, cases that they'll think. Somebody that I always think of, this is a really good example, I think of Keith Silverstein a lot, as far as someone who always keeps relevant as far as work goes. Keith does a lot of conventions as well, so he does enough, you know, like content, like internet stuff here and there, but as far as like the industry goes, he is ever evolving, changing, growing, learning. He is really good, and he, you know, not only he's a great guy, you know, he's so calm, laid back, easy to work with, and he's versatile. He's a versatile actor. He can do, like, not everything, but like pretty much everything that a single actor is capable of. Like, he's extremely adaptable, versatile, really commits. You know, he's amazing, and he's like the best. He's so sweet. He's such a great guy. There's guys like him that last. Like, Keith never goes out of style. Never. He's probably, even then, he's probably had slow periods. Probably. I wouldn't be shocked. If I'd asked him, I would imagine, like, oh yeah, are you kidding me? This year I barely worked, you know? But he fools me, because my God, he is thought of constantly, never-endingly. He is very, very good on staying on top of that. So, and I give him a lot of credit. I've worked with him. I've had the pleasure of getting to work with him a few times as well. So, but and it's funny because Wolfdrick kind of worded it as, like, you know, tricks or tips for upcoming voice actors, like more tip type things. You know, I mean, like, there's stuff like read aloud every day, read out loud every single day, like always, like, so that you're not developing any kind of slurring or, you know, impediment or anything. You know, or not even anything that serious, just like getting yourself used to constantly speaking. And, you know, especially if you're storytelling, you know, whether it, like, hell, even like just reading a newspaper, or not that you're reading a newspaper, reading an article or something, and, you know, making choices in the, you know, like, for example, what Wolfdrick wrote as part of this, like, there are some that I can list from the top of my head. Bear with me here. What used to be your end goal when you just started voice acting? Compare them to your goals in the present. That is, I just read that text and made choices, like literally just thinking of that. Just doing that even can go such a long way. And there's one other thing too. I know I did talk about this in the other video, but I'll repeat this and I'll go a little bit more into it. I think Charlie Adler's bit about how you really have to have a good sense of oneself. You have to know who you are. And to expand upon that, this is something that I learned from Trevor. Trevor Duvall on his Voice Print thing, about how you have to be a full person. You have to be a rounded out human being to be an interesting and compelling performer. You know, I live a lot in my work, truth be told. I'm trying to break out of that a little bit more, especially while I'm stuck inside going insane from recovering from this injury and everything. And I don't want to be just in my house watching, not that I don't love watching anime, but like I would go nuts if I'm just sitting in a chair and watching shows all day, you know? So I would say that, like, really being a full person, having experiences, getting out, seeing the world, doing things, learning new stuff, like picking up little things that have nothing to do with being an actor, that will serve you in life and fulfill you in different ways and give you some kind of little bonus thing, and they make you as an interesting person. You know, this is a good last little bit, I'll go out on this. I've often said that in any business, the two things you need are to be good at what you do and to be a cool person that people will want to work with. Those two things. I can show both fingers on screen. There we go. I've I've noticed that that's another complete consistent through line with everything, everybody, every business I've ever seen any part of, is if you are good at what you do and you are cool, and they'll want to, the people that make the decisions to give you an opportunity in anything, and they think you're cool and you're good at what you do, that is only going to serve you. And getting to that point of like being a cool person, whatever the hell way you want to define that, is being an interesting person, being a fascinating, just like being a fully lived human being, and not just like, I'm a voice actor and that's who I am. That's my entire life. It's like, it's great for it to be a part of your life. And it's something that we do. It's something that we love, all of us, those of us who do this professionally, and anybody watching this, listening to this in the comments, if you have ever done this professionally or even as a hobby, like, we love it. We love doing it. It's something that we're passionate about, but it's not our lives. It's not, it's not like or rather, it shouldn't be our full, entire, all-encompassing identity. Because I've met people that are like that, and they're not a joy to be around necessarily, and they don't tend to last. They don't, or even get those opportunities to begin with. They don't tend to be the people that are on the minds of those decision makers. So, take that for what you will. To anybody out there listening to that, it's there. And you know what? And this is the other thing. This is one last thing I'll say too. This is my perspective. This is my advice, my experience. It's important. This is another thing I learned from Trevor. It's important to learn from multiple people in the same way that you have multiple teachers. People who are great journeyman actors have multiple acting teachers to get different perspectives, to get different experiences. The same is true in life from everybody. Learn from different people. Get multiple different perspectives. Mine, everything I've just shared in this last, hour-ish, is just one perspective, one opinion. Different people are going to have different thoughts about every single one of the things that I said, and you make your own sort of like you carve your path through the combinations of all those things, and also figuring it out for yourself too. Because I've had pitfalls and I've had mistakes in my career path as well. There's opportunities that I'm shocked that I've had after some of the missteps that I've had, with certain things, but I've been lucky that I've had so many incredible, and still do have so many incredible people in my life and in my career that have been able to open up those doors, and they become another step on that path, another stop on that path, that you get to smell the roses and have a good time and do some cool stuff and hopefully make some art, because that's really what this is all about at the end of the day. Is we're making art, we're making cartoons and video games and cool stuff for a living. And as long as I can keep doing that, then hopefully that'll be the rest of the path as I have it. So I hope any and all of this was helpful. We have right now in our Patreon Discord server who've been tuning in. We have Kessa, Crate, Tommy Walden, and Wolf Drake, who graciously submitted these kind of little combination of questions that were made for a really good topic. And once again, I've talked for 53 minutes straight without stopping. This is the second video I've done where I've never had to take a break for a second because I just knew what I was talking about. So, but that's gonna do it. So I suppose we should call it a day. And of course, I've got to get my little outro thing here. So. This Kirblog topic was suggested by Wolf Drake. If you'd like to suggest topics for videos like these, and if you want to hear me record them in my community Discord server before they release, consider supporting me on Patreon at patreon.com/Kirbifer. And thank you very much to anybody who came here to listen in as it was premiering, or if you listen to it later. If you want to support me while I'm still recovering from my surgery and everything, please go check out my Patreon and do one of these topics once a month. And October's going to be interesting. I hope I'll be able to recover a little bit better as we move in. Spoopy month. I've got my Halloween costume already picked out. Maybe I'll do some silly videos with that if I'm not going to break my fingers doing them. But look forward to it, and I'll catch you all later.